The morning in Maple Hollow unfolded like any other. Pale sunlight filtered through the slats of the kitchen blinds, casting long golden stripes across the counter. The smell of cinnamon oatmeal hung in the air, warm and familiar. Lucas Reed, a retired military K-9 handler, stood barefoot at the stove in a worn grey t-shirt, stirring Ellie's favourite breakfast. Behind him, Ellie, barely 2 years old, cheeks full and pink, sat in her booster seat, legs swinging beneath the table in a rhythm only she understood. Her giggles filled the kitchen as she hummed a song with no words, holding tight to her stuffed bear with one arm while thumping a spoon on the tray with the other. And then there was Ranger. The German shepherd lay stretched out on the cool tile, a watchful statue in sable and black. His ears twitched at every sound, but his eyes never strayed far from Ellie. Even in retirement, the dog had never shed the discipline of service. He didn't beg, didn't whine, he observed. Lucas glanced at him once, the kind of glance that passed between old soldiers. Ranger gave a slow blink in return. "Easy morning, huh, partner?" Lucas murmured as he turned off the burner. Just then, the front door opened with a gentle click. Right on schedule. "Morning?" Chloe's voice drifted in, smooth and sing-song. She stepped into the kitchen, her canvas bag slung over one shoulder, a soft pink cardigan draped over her neat white blouse. Her hair was pinned back like always. Everything about her seemed calm, careful, prepared. Ellie squealed with joy. "Chloe!" Lucas smiled faintly. "Right on time," he said. "I try," Chloe replied with a chuckle as she walked over to Ellie, crouched, and wiped oatmeal from the child's cheek with a practiced hand. "Got a big appetite today, huh?" Lucas handed Chloe the bowl. Same routine. Banana, cinnamon, nothing new. Ranger rose from the floor, pacing slowly toward the pantry, his nails clicking against tile. He didn't approach Chloe. He never had. From the day she was hired 6 months ago, he'd kept his distance. Not aggression, just observation. It was subtle, but Lucas had noticed. This morning, though, something felt off. The dog's stance was too still. His ears were up, but the tail didn't wag. Chloe didn't seem to notice. She took the spoon, dipped it into the oatmeal, and leaned toward Ellie. And that was the moment everything shattered. With a flash of muscle and sound, Ranger lunged. The motion was explosive-controlled, yet violent in its urgency. The kitchen echoed with the scrape of claws on tile, the crash of the metal bowl tipping, and then the piercing scream as Ranger's teeth clamped down on Chloe's forearm. "Oh, my God!" Chloe shrieked, stumbling backward, the spoon flying from her hand and skittering across the floor. Ellie wailed in confusion, her spoon clattering against her tray. Lucas froze for a second, adrenaline slamming into his system like it used to in combat. "Ranger, out!" Lucas barked the command so loud it seemed to shake the walls. The shepherd released immediately. No shaking, no tearing, just a precise disengagement. Chloe dropped to her knees, sobbing and clutching her bleeding arm. Lucas rushed in, scooped Ellie out of her seat and backed away, shielding her with his body. Ranger had retreated to the edge of the pantry, but he wasn't panting. He wasn't pacing. His eyes, sharp, unflinching, were locked on something. The spoon. It lay against the floor, a smear of oatmeal across the tile. But something was wrong. A thin pink streak stained the silver. Lucas's instincts screamed. Chloe was still sobbing, rocking slightly. "Your dog's insane. He attacked me. What is wrong with him?" Lucas tossed a towel toward her. "Hold that tight." "I'm calling 911. Ranger didn't move. His body was tense, his breathing measured. He looked not at Chloe, not at Ellie, but back to the spoon. Again and again. Lucas's hands trembled as he set Ellie down in the living room, turned on the baby cartoon channel and handed her the bear. "Stay right here, Peanut." Then he moved back into the kitchen, heart pounding, eyes narrowing on the spoon. The smell of oatmeal hit his nose, but something metallic threaded through it. Faint, sharp, bitter. His voice dropped to a whisper. No. He grabbed a paper towel, wrapped it around the spoon, and set it aside. Then he eyed the half-eaten oatmeal in the bowl. The same smell, the same strange tint. Outside, sirens wailed closer now. Lucas glanced at Ranger. The dog sat like stone, amber eyes still on the floor, alert but not agitated, waiting. Lucas had seen that look before. Afghanistan, Fallujah, Kandahar. It was the look Ranger gave when he found something buried beneath the dirt, something dangerous. This wasn't random. It wasn't a bite out of nowhere. Ranger had seen something no one else did. And Lucas, despite his training, despite everything, had nearly missed it. Blood dripped between Chloe's fingers as she crouched by the kitchen counter, her sobs bouncing off the tile walls in staccato bursts. Ellie wailed in the living room, her voice raw and terrified, tears streaking her oatmeal-smeared cheeks. Lucas stood in the middle of it all, heart pounding, every nerve firing as if the walls were closing in. Ranger sat near the pantry, motionless. No growl, no bark, just alert, watching. Chloe looked up, face pale and contorted with fury. "That dog's gone crazy!" she screamed. "He tried to rip my arm off. You need to get him out of here." Lucas's hands shook. "He's never bitten anyone," he muttered. It wasn't a defense, it was disbelief. Ranger had been through 4 deployments, ridden helicopters into chaos, stood beside Lucas through firefights and flashbangs. Controlled, trained, loyal. Ranger didn't lash out. He didn't snap. Chloe pointed a trembling finger. "Call the police." "He needs to be put down." Lucas knelt by Ellie, scooping her into his arms. "Shh, baby girl. Daddy's here." Her sobs rattled against his chest, her small hands fisting in his shirt. He rocked her as he reached for his phone and dialed. 911, what's your emergency?" Lucas forced his voice steady. "Dog bite, female victim, toddler present. No ongoing danger, but I need EMTs and an officer on site." As he ended the call, his gaze flicked to the spoon again, still wrapped in the paper towel on the counter. That pink smear it hadn't faded, and the smell still lingered in the air. Not cinnamon, not banana, something chemical. Lucas set Ellie down in the hallway with her bear and a blanket, whispering, "I'll be right back. Stay here, okay?" She didn't answer, just blinked at him with wide, damp eyes. Chloe rocked back and forth on her heels, pressing the towel harder against her arm. "You don't get it. That dog is dangerous. He should have been put down when he left the military. They lose control. They're time bombs." Lucas didn't answer. He walked over to the bowl on the table, leaned in, and sniffed. It was faint but sharp. Underneath the oatmeal, beneath the warmth and fruit, was a trace of something bitter, metallic. His stomach tightened. He dipped a clean spoon into the mush, lifted it toward his nose. There it was again. Not food, not right. The knock on the front door was followed by the sound of boots on wood. "Maple Hollow Police!" a voice called. Lucas opened the door to a uniformed officer, a young woman with cropped hair and sharp eyes, flanked by 2 EMTs. "In the kitchen," Lucas said, stepping aside. Chloe launched into her version the moment they entered. "He let that dog attack me. It was unprovoked. I was just feeding the baby and it snapped." The officer turned to Lucas. "Is the dog secure?" "He's sitting in the kitchen." "He hasn't moved. Is he trained?" "More than most humans I've served with." The officer gave him a look, but didn't argue. She stepped into the kitchen and froze when she saw Ranger. The shepherd sat perfectly still, ears up, body relaxed but ready. His eyes flicked to the officer, then back to the spoon on the floor, a soldier waiting for his next order. One EMT began treating Chloe. peeling back the towel. "Deep puncture," he murmured. "Might need stitches. We'll clean and wrap it now, but she should come in for a full check." "She's not going anywhere until the dog is restrained." Chloe snapped. He could lunge again. The officer turned to Lucas. "You'll need to leash him. Animal control is en route. For now, we need him secured." Lucas hesitated. Ranger hadn't moved, hadn't so much as growled. He wasn't out of control. He was focused, still watching the spoon. But Lucas nodded. "He'll come with me." He grabbed Ranger's lead from the hook near the pantry and crouched. "Come," he said quietly. Ranger rose, slow and steady, and walked to Lucas's side without resistance. No tension in his frame, no fear, only the quiet discipline of years of partnership. Lucas clipped on the lead and kept one hand on the shepherd's shoulder. "Good boy," he whispered. The officer watched the interaction with a furrowed brow. "That's not how most dangerous dogs behave." "He's not dangerous," Lucas said. "He's careful." She didn't argue, but her eyes stayed sharp. The EMTs finished dressing Chloe's arm and helped her to the living room. Chloe clutched her bag tight, refusing to meet Ranger's gaze. Animal control arrived minutes later, a middle-aged man in a faded county jacket. He walked up to Ranger, took one look and asked, "Is he muzzle-trained?" Lucas nodded and retrieved the soft restraint. He slipped it on, even as his stomach turned. Ranger didn't resist. He didn't flinch. But when Lucas clipped the second lead to the handler's belt, Ranger looked up at him with steady eyes that said everything. "There's more. You know it." The animal control officer led him away, murmuring, "We'll hold him for observation. If your story checks out, it's probably temporary." Lucas stood on the porch and watched them go. Ranger didn't look back. Inside, the kitchen felt cold. He walked over to the bowl still on the table, the spoon beside it now wrapped neatly in paper towel. He opened a drawer, pulled out a plastic sandwich bag, and slipped the spoon inside. Then he sealed some of the oatmeal into another. He didn't know what it was yet, but he knew what it wasn't. And that meant something. Lucas grabbed his phone and scrolled to a name he hadn't called in years, Dr. Carmen Bell. If anyone could tell him what was really in his daughter's breakfast, it was her. He hit dial. The line rang once, then clicked. "Lucas Reed?" Her voice was clipped, familiar, all business. "I need your help," he said. The words didn't come easy, but they came true. "I think someone tried to poison my kid. And the only one who saw it coming was my dog." The front door clicked shut behind the animal control officer, and with it, the sound of Ranger's paws disappeared down the porch steps. The quiet that followed wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that came after something breaks. Not loud, just wrong. Lucas stood at the kitchen sink, staring at the spoon in the bag on the counter. The pink smear across the metal hadn't faded. Under the warm overhead light, it shimmered faintly like something that didn't belong. The oatmeal in the bowl had cooled, its surface congealed slightly, but that bitter scent still lingered beneath the banana and cinnamon. He knew that smell, not from parenting, from war zones, from back rooms of abandoned compounds when things had gone bad. Lucas opened the drawer, pulled out another sandwich bag, and slid a few spoonfuls of the oatmeal inside. He pressed it flat, sealed it tight, and placed both bags inside a manila envelope. His fingers hovered there for a moment. Then he added a third item, a folded napkin with a faint oily smear from the spoon's tip. Everything about this morning had gone sideways fast. But not randomly. He walked to the living room and glanced at Ellie, now curled on the couch with her bear tucked under her chin. Her eyelids fluttered, breath slow and even, still wearing her breakfast, but safe. Lucas pulled out his phone, scrolled to a contact he hadn't used in years, and hit call. 2 rings. Then a voice answered, sharp and dry, like desert air. Bell. Carmen, it's Lucas Reed. A pause. Well, hell. I was just wondering which former operator would resurface first. I need you. Another pause. The sarcasm dropped. What happened? I have a sample I need tested. Quietly, off record. It's from my daughter's breakfast. I think there's something in it. What kind of something? I don't know. But my dog stopped her from eating it. Bit the nanny. Full lockdown mode, eyes on the spoon. Carmen didn't speak right away. When she did, her tone had shifted. Focused, clinical. That's the K9 you served with? Yeah, Ranger, bring it. You remember where the lab is? I'll be there in 30. She ended the call without another word. Lucas grabbed his keys, stuffed the envelope inside a messenger bag, and turned back to Ellie. She stirred slightly as he scooped her up. Still warm? Still here. Outside, the morning had hardened. What had started as sunlight now sat behind clouds. The breeze carried the scent of pavement and early autumn. The quiet of Maple Hollow no longer felt like peace. It felt like distraction. At the Maple Hollow precinct, a patrol officer took down the official statement. The incident was logged. Dog bite, female civilian, minor injury. Investigation pending. Lucas had given them the facts, careful not to mention the spoon. Not yet. Not without confirmation. He knew how things worked. If he said the word poison, protocols would spin into motion. Reports, forms, delays. And somewhere along the way, the truth would get buried under the weight of assumption. He couldn't let that happen. Not with Ellie in the middle of it. Ranger's temporary hold was confirmed. Observation for 72 hours. The officer at the desk looked at Lucas with a practiced neutrality. Assuming no further incident, your K9 will be evaluated by Animal Services. If he passes, he can be released after review. Lucas signed the paperwork, each signature feeling like betrayal. As he stepped outside, he opened the car door and laid Ellie gently in her booster seat. She stirred, blinked once, and reached for her bear. Almost home, sweetheart. Lucas whispered, just a quick stop. The drive to Carmen's lab took them just outside the edge of town. Tucked behind a shuttered veterinary clinic, the building didn't look like much. But Lucas remembered it from years ago, a place where the right kind of silence hummed under the machines, where Carmen had identified things that no one else could. She met him at the door, her lab coat already streaked with chemicals, dark curls pulled back tight. She didn't waste time with small talk. She's beautiful, she said softly, nodding toward Ellie. She almost didn't make it to lunch. Lucas replied. He handed over the envelope. Carmen carried it straight to the stainless steel counter, flipped on the exhaust fan, and snapped on gloves. What are you thinking? She asked. Something synthetic. Maybe a glycol compound. I'm smelling antifreeze, but it's faint. And the color, it's not right. She nodded, pulling open the bags. That would explain the sweetness underneath the bitterness. Ethylene glycol is often sweet. Animals drink it all the time without knowing. With a child, it wouldn't take much. Lucas swallowed. What happens if it's confirmed? Depends on the dose and the exposure. Repeated ingestion, kidney damage, central nervous issues. Worse, Carmen leaned over the sample, sniffed gently, then blinked and stepped back. Yeah, she said. That's not cinnamon. Lucas clenched his jaw. I'll run GCMS first. Should give us a chemical fingerprint. She moved with precision, loading the sample into the machine. Why didn't you take this to the cops? Because they'd take my daughter's name, my dog's badge history, and turn it into a custody debate and an investigation into a bite. And meanwhile, the real danger might walk away clean. Carmen's expression didn't shift. Still paranoid. Still alive. Lucas replied. The machine hummed to life, the display lit with lines of data. Carmen leaned in, studying the peaks and dips as they formed. She didn't speak for several minutes. Then she stood straight and looked him dead in the eye. It's ethylene glycol. Trace level, but enough to harm if repeated. This wasn't cross-contamination. This was deliberate. Lucas stared at her. The room felt like it tilted slightly. Carmen peeled off her gloves, her voice low. Your K9 knew. Before you did, Lucas turned to the glass window behind her. Outside, Ellie sat in her car seat, humming quietly to her bear, oblivious. Safe. God, he whispered. He really saw it. Carmen nodded. He didn't just see it, Lucas. He stopped it. Lucas exhaled hard, a tremor running through his spine. He looked back at her, voice hoarse. Then I owe him more than an apology. And now, he thought, I need to find out who tried to hurt my kid. And why. Lucas didn't speak on the drive home. The silence wasn't intentional, it was survival. His mind moved faster than he could control. Every glance in the rearview mirror at Ellie brought the same thought. What if Ranger hadn't been there? The reality twisted deeper than fear. It rooted into betrayal. He pulled into the driveway, let the engine idle a moment, and stared blankly at the front porch. Just 2 hours ago, it had been a normal Tuesday. Ellie's laughter, Ranger's paws tapping on hardwood, the faint scent of cinnamon and oats. Now it all felt contaminated. Inside, the house was quiet. He placed Ellie gently on the couch, still napping, then walked straight to the kitchen. The bowl was gone. So was the spoon. He checked the trash. Empty. The dishwasher had been run. Not a single trace. Too clean. He stood there, watching the slow spin of the drying cycle, when the front door creaked. Chloe, her voice came light and casual. Hey, I just stopped by to check on Ellie. Is she okay? I've been so shaken up since the incident. Lucas turned to face her. She looked polished. Too polished. Hair tied back. Not a strand out of place. She clutched her phone like it was her lifeline. She's resting, Lucas said evenly. She's stable. That's a relief, Chloe said, placing a hand over her chest. Poor baby. I don't know what got into that dog. He was always gentle. But this morning, something snapped. Lucas studied her. There was no tremble in her voice, no guilt in her eyes, only a carefully painted worry, practiced to the point of performance. Do you remember if anything was off about the food this morning? He asked. Chloe blinked, just a beat too long. No, it was just her usual. Oatmeal with mashed banana, a little cinnamon, organic, like always. Why? I found something odd in the bowl. A strange smell. She tilted her head. Maybe the banana was overripe. You know how they can get that. Tang Lucas nodded slowly. Sure. Maybe she smiled, but her fingers flexed around the phone. You mind sticking around for a minute? He asked. Of course. He stepped into the hallway and pretended to check something on the thermostat, but his ears stayed tuned to her footsteps. She didn't go to Ellie. She moved toward the kitchen, opened a drawer, paused, closed it. Lucas stepped back into the room just as she turned. She smiled again. I was just checking if you had more chamomile. Figured it might help Ellie relax when she wakes. She'll be fine. Lucas said quietly. I've got her covered. Chloe hesitated. Okay, well, let me know if you need anything. I'm happy to take a few days off if you think Ellie's a little shaken. Lucas nodded. Yeah, let's take the rest of the week. I'll text you. She nodded, but her face didn't quite match the words. It was too fast, like she'd been waiting for that out. After she left, Lucas walked straight to the laundry room. He pulled a small, hardened ball of Ranger's fur from the trash, something that had been brushed off the couch a few days ago and tossed there by Chloe. He placed it into a sandwich bag. His next stop was the garage, where an old blue cooler still sat from the last camping trip. He opened it. Inside was a mostly full bottle of windshield washer fluid, ethylene glycol-based. Open cap. He hadn't touched that cooler in weeks. Neither had Ellie, but Chloe had cleaned it out last Friday. His stomach twisted. Lucas texted Carmen. "Elle, got something else? Might need you to test fur sample. Check for absorption." "See, drop it at the lab. Front box. No cameras." Lucas drove with a steady hand, but his thoughts churned. Chloe had been part of their home for 6 months. She had Ellie's bedtime routine memorized, had celebrated her 3rd birthday with cupcakes and a gift. She cried, watching cartoons with her. And now, Lucas couldn't shake the image of Ranger throwing himself between Ellie and the bowl. Not out of instinct, out of knowing. That night, after Ellie went to sleep, Lucas sat on the floor with her favorite blanket wrapped around his shoulders. He watched her chest rise and fall, slow and rhythmic. Then he opened his laptop and pulled up an encrypted drive. Photos, field notes, deployment logs. He wasn't looking for comfort, he was looking for history. Ranger's file sat at the top. Last updated 18 months ago. In bold type, one line stood out. Trained for multi-target detection. Narcotics, accelerants, and toxins, including EG-class chemicals. He wasn't just a dog. He was a sentinel, a living instrument of detection and protection. Built not to bark at strangers, but to act when threat met threshold. And this morning, Ranger had acted. With purpose, not panic. Lucas leaned his head back and let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, from realization. Ranger had tried to tell him, not with words but with teeth and stance and the refusal to back down. Ellie could have died. Instead, she was curled up safe in her bed, Bear by her side, breath even. And Chloe. She had walked out the front door like it was any other Tuesday. But the test results from Carmen would tell the rest of the story, and Lucas was ready for answers. Lucas sat at the edge of the couch, laptop balanced on his knees, Ranger's head resting on his foot like a weighted reminder that trust, once broken, was rarely cleanly repaired. The house was quiet except for the low whir of the ceiling fan and the occasional breath from Ellie's baby monitor. He opened the folder marked Home Cam 2, Kitchen, and dragged the slider to 6:58 a.m., 10 minutes before the incident. His hand hovered over the trackpad, stomach tight. Then he hit play. The footage was still and mundane at first. Chloe entered the kitchen carrying her tote bag, phone balanced between shoulder and ear. She moved with the casual confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times before. Pulled out a small pot, poured oatmeal from a box, mashed banana, stirred. Then, at 7:04 a.m., something changed. She glanced toward the hallway. Twice. Then reached into her bag. Lucas leaned forward, brow tightening. From the tote, she retrieved a small, clear container. No label, no markings, just a quick flick of her wrist as she opened the cap and tipped a thin stream of liquid into the pot. She stirred fast, eyes on the hallway. Then she returned the container to her bag as if it had never existed. Lucas hit pause. He rewound it. Watched again. Same movement, same rhythm. A practiced routine. He took a deep breath, hit print screen, and saved the still. Then he stood and crossed to the hallway where Ranger lay, alert but calm. The dog met his eyes with that same steady gaze Lucas had seen 1,000 times before. But now it felt different. He wasn't just a dog watching. He was a partner. "Good boy," Lucas said quietly. "You saw it before I did." Ranger didn't move, just flicked an ear and stayed exactly where he was on duty. Lucas printed 4 frames from the video, Chloe looking over her shoulder. The container. The pouring. The stir. He transferred the full footage to a USB drive, slipped it and the screenshots into a manila folder, and headed to the station. It was late morning when he walked into the East District Police Department. The air smelled like printer ink and overused coffee machines. At the reception desk, he asked for Detective Amy Novak. The officer on duty looked up. "You have an appointment?" "No," Lucas said, voice steady. "But it's about potential child endangerment." "I've got evidence. Video. I need to speak to her." That was the right phrase. 10 minutes later, Lucas sat in a grey-walled interview room across from Novak. Early 40s, clean-cut, eyes that had seen too many stories end badly. She took one look at the folder, then met his eyes directly. "Walk me through it." Lucas laid it out. Not the drama, just the facts. The oatmeal, Ranger's intervention, Ellie's symptoms, the toxicology results from his off-the-record contact. And then the footage. He slid the screenshots across the table. Novak examined each image with the trained focus of someone who'd built entire cases from single frames. "Video match these?" "Yes, all time-stamped. Same day as the incident," she nodded. "This the first time something happened?" "No, but it's the first time I noticed. Ranger's behavior was too specific to ignore." Novak raised an eyebrow. "The dog picked it up?" Lucas nodded. "He's not a pet. He's former military. Scent-trained, trained to detect substances like e.g." She whistled low under her breath. "Hell of a nose. Saved her life." Novak leaned back in her chair. "We'll run with this." "You understand, though, video's strong, but if the substance can't be identified, we'll need more. Do you still have the bowl?" "No." She ran the dishwasher. "That's unfortunate." But not a deal-breaker. She cleaned the bowl and then offered to take time off. Novak's expression sharpened. "Trying to stay out of sight." "That tracks. She's with kids all the time." "That scares me more than anything. We'll pull her background, employment history, run her name through CPS and law enforcement databases. If she's done this before, there'll be something. And if she hasn't, we'll make sure she never does again." Lucas handed her the flash drive. Full footage. Start to finish, Novak slid it into her folder. "You did the right thing bringing this in. Quiet's better. If she thinks she's being watched, she'll cover more tracks. I want her away from Ellie." "That's my job now." Lucas paused. "And Ranger?" Novak smiled faintly. "From what I'm hearing, that dog's more reliable than half the units on the force. He's safe that night." Back at home, Lucas sat in the nursery. Ellie clutched her bear, still sleeping. The baby monitor glowed soft blue. Across the room, Ranger lay beneath the window, eyes open, watching shadows pass across the wall. Lucas reached out, hand brushing the dog's back. "Whatever happens," he murmured, "we'll do this right. No one's getting past you again." Ranger didn't stir, didn't need to. The war was here now. Not in Afghanistan, not on patrol routes or in ambush zones, but here, in kitchens, and trust and betrayal. And Ranger was still fighting it. Detective Amy Novak didn't waste time. By noon the next day, Lucas was back at the precinct, sitting across from her in the same grey-walled room, this time with a different energy in the air. Ranger lay at his feet, unmoving, except for the faint twitch of an ear. He wasn't just a dog anymore, he was part of the case now. Novak slid a folder across the table. "Thought you might want to see what we pulled." Lucas opened it. The first page showed a mugshot. Different hair color, heavier makeup, but the eyes were unmistakably Chloe's. The name below it, Angela Marie Kressler. "Who the hell is that?" Novak leaned forward. "That's your nanny." Real name's Angela Kressler. She used a forged background under the name Chloe Hartman. The ID checks out on a surface level, but once we dug, things unraveled fast. Lucas flipped through. multiple aliases, temporary addresses. A juvenile record sealed in one state, unsealed in another due to a breach in foster protocol. Then came the court documents, a neglect charge from Ohio, 2017. Angela had been a live-in nanny for a couple with twin toddlers. The parents left for a weekend conference. When they returned, one of the children had bruises and a fever. No explanation. Angela vanished before charges could be formally pressed. She was found 3 days later, camping in a rest stop off Dam 75, alone, with a notebook full of cryptic prayers and disturbing, childlike drawings. Lucas felt his stomach drop. She skipped town, changed names, and applied again. Novak nodded. Yeah, and unfortunately the system let her. Lucas rubbed his face. Ellie, she's safe. Thanks to your dog. Ranger, without moving his body, turned his head toward Novak as if recognizing the praise. She smirked. Smart one, isn't he? You have no idea. Lucas murmured. Novak reached under the table and pulled out a sealed plastic bag. We got a search warrant for her apartment last night. Found this in her closet. Inside was a spiral notebook. Pages dog-eared, corners stained, handwriting looped and erratic. Some pages full of lists, child meal schedules, feeding times, nap intervals, written with obsessive detail. Others were far darker. Lucas stared at a page showing a child drawn with arms outstretched, eyes blacked out with heavy marker lines. Underneath, in shaky writing, "They made her weak. I'll make her better." Another, "Fix the broken ones. Start young. Rewire the love." And then, "This one's name is Ellie. Perfect bones, pure skin. No noise when she sleeps." Lucas dropped the notebook like it burned. Novak didn't flinch. There's more. She opened a separate file. This wasn't just some twisted ideology. She believed she was chosen, thought she was reparenting children who were improperly loved. Her words. Lucas sat back in his chair, the air sucked from his lungs. And no one knew? She slipped between states. Never stayed long, never got caught long enough. She kept it quiet. Until now, Ranger let out a low rumble. Not a bark, not a growl, just a warning in his throat. Lucas looked down. She never fooled you, did she? Ranger stood and paced once around the room. His nose brushed the notebook bag before he turned back to Lucas, eyes steady. Lucas could almost hear what he wanted to say. Something's off. Something's been off. He thought back, the way Ranger would stiffen whenever Chloe entered the room, how he'd position himself between her and Ellie during feedings, the bark that stopped Lucas that day, the one he almost brushed off. You tried to tell me. Ranger Saturday. Novak closed the folder. We've issued a warrant for her arrest. She's not in custody yet, but she won't get far. She's not careful when she runs. She panics. Lucas stood, pressing a hand to his chest, grounding himself. I want to be there when she's caught. I can't promise that, Novak said, but I can promise we'll protect your daughter. He nodded, then looked at Ranger again. You did more than protect her. Lucas whispered. You saw the monster behind the mask. Later that night, back at home, Lucas retrieved an old photo from a frame on the bookshelf. It showed his late wife holding Ellie in the hospital bed, with Ranger sitting beside them in his vest back, when he was still technically government property. I don't know what I would have done without you, Lucas said, kneeling beside the dog. Ranger leaned forward and pressed his head gently into Lucas's chest. This wasn't just instinct. This wasn't just training. This was loyalty with a heartbeat, judgment in silence, the kind of knowing that no man could teach. And as the night deepened around them, Lucas finally understood. Ranger never stopped serving. Not the uniform, not the flag, not even the rules. He served the child, Because he knew before anyone else did exactly who Chloe really was. The call came just after 4 p.m. while the autumn sun was slipping behind the pines. Detective Novak's voice was clipped, urgent. "She's gone." Lucas froze in the middle of the nursery. Ellie curled asleep against his shoulder. "What do you mean, gone?" "She faked discharge papers, used a nurse's badge. We don't know how she got it yet. Security footage shows her leaving the hospital in scrubs and a face mask. We've already put out a bolo. Lock your doors. Do not leave the house. Do not—" But Lucas had already hung up. By the time he reached the front door, Ranger was already there. Tense, tail still, nose pressed to the bottom of the door frame. He hadn't made a sound. Lucas dropped the deadbolt into place, then checked every window. The motion lights were working. The garage was shut. He reset the alarm twice. Still, his hands wouldn't stop shaking. "She's coming here," he said to himself. Ranger turned his head, ears flicking like radar. Lucas met his gaze. "You already knew, didn't you?" It was a silent confirmation. Lucas carried Ellie to the master bedroom and set up camp. Bassinet beside the bed, flashlight on the nightstand, baseball bat leaning on the wall, gun locked but ready in the drawer, and Ranger always within arm's reach. Night fell like a weighted curtain. Lucas didn't sleep. Neither did Ranger. Every creak in the floor, every wind-brushed tree branch had a sound too sharp, too intentional. The minutes passed in slow motion. Midnight, 1 a.m., 2:15. Then Ranger growled. Low, deep, measured. Lucas sat up, heart pounding. The growl turned to a bark. Short, controlled, a signal. Ranger leapt down from the bed and padded toward the back door like a soldier reclaiming his post. Lucas followed, barefoot on cold hardwood. And there she was. Outside the glass sliding door, faint in the porch light's halo, stood Chloe. Or Angela. Or whatever her name was now. She was barefoot, her hospital gown replaced by a hoodie and dark jeans, hair tied up. One gloved hand held something metal at her side. Ranger blocked the door, muscles bunched, head lowered. Lucas grabbed the phone with one hand and pressed speed dial for Novak. She's here. Backyard. Now he stayed calm, voice level, heart slamming. On the porch, Chloe smiled. It wasn't fear. It was certainty. She mouthed something through the glass. She's mine. Lucas stood firm. No, she's not. Then Chloe stepped back, out of sight. Lucas didn't hesitate. He turned off every light, grabbed the flashlight, and positioned himself and Ranger near the rear hallway, between Chloe's likely entry point and Ellie's room. 3 minutes passed. Then came the sound of glass breaking. Not the back door, a window, kitchen. Lucas didn't move. Ranger didn't bark. They waited. A shadow moved across the hallway wall. Chloe entered slow, quiet, believing she still had control. And then Ranger moved. Not wild, not reckless. He surged forward with precision, teeth bared, barking sharp and explosive. Chloe shrieked, dropped the object. It clanged on tile, a pair of scissors. Lucas shouted, "Down, now!" Ranger had her cornered against the wall, hackles raised, barking so fiercely it rattled the picture frames. Chloe screamed, "I just wanted to fix her!" I could have made her better. Red-blue lights flashed through the front windows. Sirens, knocking. "Police!" Lucas pulled Ranger back a half-inch, voice firm. "Stay!" Ranger didn't lunge, he didn't bite, but he didn't yield either. It took 4 officers to drag Chloe out. She thrashed, cursed, screamed Ellie's name. But Lucas wasn't listening anymore. He was on his knees, arms wrapped around Ranger's neck, face buried in fur. "You did it," he whispered. "You waited. You watched. And you kept her safe." Ranger exhaled deeply, eyes finally softening, tension melting. He wasn't a weapon. He wasn't a tool. He was family. And tonight he had stood exactly where he was meant to be. Maple Hollow had never seen a trial like this. By the time jury selection began, the town's courthouse was under siege by reporters, satellite trucks, and onlookers who lined up hours before doors opened. Locals brought folding chairs and thermoses of coffee just to watch the attorneys arrive. Every cafe discussion began with the same question. Did you hear what she did? But for Lucas, it wasn't spectacle. It was survival. He sat in the front row every day, a silent presence. Ellie asleep in a sling against his chest. He didn't flinch at the prosecution's photos. He didn't cry when they played the footage. He just watched. And Ranger sat beside him, still and alert, his vest marked with a single word. Retired. Day 1, the video was shown in full. Chloe, head slightly tilted, pouring something from a dropper bottle into Ellie's bowl of oatmeal. She thought no one was watching. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Next, the toxicology report. Traces of a non-prescription sleep aid, diphenhydramine, in increasing doses over several weeks. Enough to sedate a toddler. Enough to make her vulnerable. Enough, the expert testified, that if it had continued unchecked, Ellie's heart rate could have slowed to a dangerous level. Then came the twist. The defense argued mental illness, claimed Chloe, or Angela Whitcomb, her real name, was a troubled soul trying to create order in a chaotic world, that she believed she was fixing the child, not harming her. But then came the diary, recovered from the bottom of her duffel bag, pages filled with obsessive loops. Must erase the bad parts. One entry read, "The real mother ruined her. I can fix it. I'll do better." There were diagrams, feeding schedules, correction tactics. Scribbles that bordered on violent. Detective Amy Novak was called to testify. She walked the jury through Angela's past, her previous conviction for neglecting a child in Oregon, her probation violation, her disappearance, the false identity she used to apply for nanny positions in small towns with limited background checks. Then on day 5, Lucas was called. He didn't dramatize. He didn't editorialize. He described Ellie's changed behavior, her night terrors, her sudden fear of food, her aversion to Chloe's voice, and then he told the jury about the dog, about Ranger. He knew something was wrong before I did. Lucas said, "He stood in front of my daughter, night after night, like he was shielding her. Not from shadows, but from a real threat. And I ignored it, because I thought I was being paranoid." There was a pause. The prosecutor asked, "And what changed?" Lucas looked toward Ranger, resting beside the witness stand, his gaze steady, ears flicking as if he recognized his name. "What changed?" Lucas said, voice tight, "was that Ranger didn't give up. He didn't bark out of habit. He barked because she needed help. The jury took only 4 hours. Angela Whitcomb was found guilty of attempted child endangerment, identity fraud, and use of a controlled substance on a minor. Sentencing came 2 weeks later, 25 years. She never spoke during the trial. Not to apologize, not to explain. Just sat with that same unsettling smile, like the ending she got wasn't the one she expected. The media left after the verdict, moving on to newer horrors. But Maple Hollow remembered. The mayor held a small ceremony on the town green. A bronze plaque was mounted on a stone pedestal under the old elm tree, in memory of those who protect us without words. Below it, an engraving of a German shepherd's face. No name, no dates, but everyone knew. That wasn't just a dog. That was Ranger. And he didn't just save a child. He reminded a town that sometimes the quietest voice is the one that roars the loudest when it matters. The leaves had just begun to turn, painting Maple Hollow in strokes of gold and rust, when the town gathered at Miller's Field to honor someone who didn't speak, didn't stand upright, and didn't ask for anything more than a chance to be close. They came with lawn chairs and casseroles, with children holding cardboard signs and veterans wearing their medals. Banners stretched across the old fence read, "K9 Hero of Maple Hollow." The mayor stood awkwardly at a podium set on a makeshift wooden stage, microphones squealing in the wind. But no one looked at him. All eyes were on the black and tan German shepherd sitting beside a little girl with wild curls and a pink jacket. Ellie. She clung to Ranger's neck, her fingers tangled in the thick fur at his scruff. He didn't move, didn't flinch at the crowd or the noise. His ears tracked the sounds, his eyes constantly scanning, but his body remained grounded like a stone, carved from loyalty itself. Lucas stood beside them, one hand resting lightly on Ellie's shoulder. His other hand clutched a small wooden plaque. The letters carved into it weren't ornate, just 3 words that said everything. Protector, guardian, family. The mayor cleared his throat. "I think we all know why we're here," he said, his voice more fragile than usual. "But let me say it plainly. This town owes a debt to a dog, and I never thought I'd say that in front of reporters." A ripple of laughter broke the tension, and a few people dabbed at their eyes. "This animal," the mayor continued, "this retired military working dog named Ranger identified a threat, acted with instinct, and helped save the life of a child when no one else saw what was happening. He didn't bark for attention, he barked for truth." As the crowd stood, applause broke out, spontaneous and heartfelt. Ranger didn't react to the noise. He looked up only when Ellie pressed her cheek to his, whispering something into his ear that no one else could hear. A military working dog trainer from Fort Bragg stepped up next. Sergeant Reeves. She wore her Class A uniform, ribbons glinting under the late afternoon sun. In her hand, she held a small medal with a navy blue ribbon. "Ranger served in Afghanistan for 3 tours," she said. "Tracked explosives, located wounded soldiers, never once failed a mission. And now, in retirement, he's completed 1 more. She bent to one knee and clipped the ribbon gently onto Ranger's collar. "Officially," she said, her voice cracking. "Ranger, you are recognized as a Distinguished Service K9 civilian class. But to this girl and this town, you're something more." Ranger let out a low exhale, a kind of release, as if in that moment the burden he'd carried since war had eased just slightly. Later that evening, back home, Lucas mounted the wooden plaque above the fireplace. Ellie insisted it go where Ranger can see it. He didn't say no. That night, as the fireplace cast flickering shadows along the living room wall, Ranger lay at Ellie's feet like always. She slept on a beanbag, arm wrapped around his midsection, her breathing in sync with his. Lucas watched from the kitchen, one hand on a mug of tea that had long gone cold. Outside, wind rustled the pines. Inside, Ranger stirred once, eyes scanning, then settled again. No one would ever see him as just a dog again. He was the line between harm and hope, the wall that didn't crumble, protector, guardian, family. And he wore those words like a second coat of fur. The snow came early that year. Not heavy, just enough to hush the world outside, to soften the sounds of the town and muffle the creaks in the old pine trees behind the house. It had been 2 months since the trial, 2 months since Chloe's sentencing. And for the first time in what felt like years, the house on Meadow Lane had found its breath again. Lucas noticed it in the small things. The way Ellie no longer flinched when he raised his voice to call her for dinner. The way she sang again in the bath, off-key and full-hearted. The way Ranger no longer paced the hall at night, but instead chose his spot at the end of Ellie's bed and stayed there until morning. Life didn't go back to normal, it found a new rhythm, one shaped by quiet gratitude and sharper instincts. Lucas had taken a leave of absence from the carpentry co-op. He spent his mornings fixing the sagging front porch, his afternoons making soup, and his evenings by the fire with Ellie, a book in hand and Ranger curled at their feet like a sentinel carved from loyalty. He still ran his fingers over the scar near Ranger's left flank sometimes. The one from Kandahar. It felt rough beneath the fur, a reminder that even the strongest protectors carry their stories silently. That night, as the wind rolled in low across the valley and the fireplace crackled, Lucas tucked Ellie in beneath the quilt her grandmother had sewn years ago. Ranger hopped up before she asked. He always seemed to know. He settled beside her, head resting gently across her legs. Ellie looked up, her voice a sleepy whisper. "Daddy," she said. "Did Ranger know before you did?" "About Chloe?" Lucas paused. He didn't rush the answer. Just stood there, hand resting on the doorframe, watching the rise and fall of his daughter's chest and the steady rhythm of the dog beside her. "Yeah," he finally said, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. "He always does." She nodded once, eyes drifting closed, her fingers still tangled in the thick fur by Ranger's neck. Lucas stayed in the hallway a moment longer, arms crossed, listening. Not just to Ellie's breathing, but to the silence. Ranger's head lifted, his eyes met Lucas's, no bark, no whine, just a silent exchange, a promise still kept. Later, downstairs, Lucas opened the drawer by the kitchen sink and pulled out an old Polaroid. The photo was bent and faded Ranger with his handler, Staff Sergeant Miguel Ramirez, somewhere dusty and far from home. The photo had been delivered with Ranger's retirement papers long before Lucas adopted him. On the back, in blocky handwriting, it read, "He always watches." Even when you think no one does, Lucas placed it next to the plaque above the fireplace. That night, before bed, he added one final line in Ellie's journal. "Trust doesn't come easy, but sometimes it comes with 4 paws and a quiet gaze that sees everything before we do." The snow continued to fall outside, soft, unbothered. Inside, Ranger lay in his usual spot. Not for show, not for thanks. Just watching. Always watching. What's your story with a loyal pet? If Ranger's story moved you, let it be more than just a tale. Subscribe to German Shepherd Stories, share your moment, honor their watch. They're never just dogs. They're guardians of the quiet, protectors of the unspoken, and sometimes they know long before we do.